A boy named Daniel sat in the back seat of his father's sleek black SUV, arms crossed, lips in a tight frown. He was used to getting his way, especially in Lagos, where his father's business connections and wealth afforded him a life of comfort and luxury. When his father first mentioned sending him to the family's rural village for the summer, Daniel thought it was a joke. But the serious look on his father's face made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. It was a mandate. And so, here he was, dressed in designer jeans and sneakers, headed to a place he hadn't visited in years, a place where no one cared about his status or fancy clothes. As they approached the village, Daniel's irritation only grew. Instead of high-rise buildings, bustling cafes, and city lights, he saw endless fields and scattered mud huts. The houses, with their thatched roofs and rough brick walls, looked nothing like his family's polished modern mansion in Lagos. He grimaced at the chickens wandering across the road, at the children playing in the dirt, and at the elderly men and women sitting in the shade of large trees, chatting and laughing as if they had no care in the world. Daniel was far from thrilled about spending his summer here, away from his friends, his video games, and his favorite cafe in the city. Daniel stepped out of the SUV, shielding his eyes from the bright afternoon sun. His father's old friend, Uncle Sammy, was waiting for them, a tall man with a warm, weathered face and a strong, earthy scent from years of working on the land. Uncle Sammy smiled broadly as he greeted Daniel with a firm handshake, but Daniel merely nodded, trying to hide his irritation. As they walked through the village, Daniel noticed how everyone seemed to know each other. Neighbors greeted one another with genuine smiles, children played freely, and a group of elderly women chatted under a mango tree, laughing heartily. Daniel felt out of place and uncomfortable. He missed the anonymity of the city, where he could blend into the background, not like here, where everyone's eyes were on him, assessing the city boy in his fancy clothes. Uncle Sammy led Daniel to his modest home, a small mud brick house with a thatched roof. Inside, there was a single room with a simple bed, a few stools, and a small cooking area. Gone were the comforts of his spacious bedroom, air conditioning, and constant electricity. Daniel sighed as he looked around, unable to hide his disappointment. Uncle Sammy, noticing Daniel's reaction, simply chuckled. "You'll get used to it, Daniel. There's much to learn here if you're willing," he said, his tone friendly but firm. Daniel managed a half-hearted nod, still unable to grasp what there was to learn in a place so simple. The next morning, Daniel woke up to the sound of roosters crowing and goats bleating outside the window. He groaned, missing the silence of his city home. After a quick breakfast of porridge and boiled plantains, Uncle Sammy encouraged him to explore the village. Reluctantly, Daniel wandered outside, where he soon attracted the attention of a group of local kids. They eyed him curiously, whispering and giggling as he walked by. One of the boys, a confident, barefoot kid named Samson, approached Daniel with a grin. "You're the city boy, right?" he asked with a mischievous glint in his eyes. Daniel nodded, feeling self-conscious. "Do you know how to climb trees? Or catch fish?" Samson asked, clearly testing him. Daniel shook his head, feeling a pang of embarrassment. He'd never had to do anything like that in his life. Everything he wanted was always bought for him. The kids laughed, not in a mean way, but with genuine amusement. Samson slapped him on the back. "Don't worry, city boy. We'll teach you. Stick with us, and you might even enjoy yourself here." Daniel was skeptical, but he couldn't help feeling a flicker of curiosity. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to this place than he'd thought. Over the next few days, Daniel began spending time with Samson and his friends. They took him to the river, where they taught him how to catch fish with simple nets. At first, Daniel struggled, slipping on the muddy banks and barely managing to hold the net steady. The boys laughed and teased him, but they encouraged him too, showing him the proper techniques. Daniel's hands and feet grew sore from the rough work, but something inside him began to change. For the first time, he felt the satisfaction of doing something with his own hands, of earning something rather than just being given it. When he caught his first fish, Samson clapped him on the back, cheering, "See? Told you you'd get it, city boy." Daniel felt a strange surge of pride as he looked at the fish flopping in his hands. Back at Uncle Sammy's home, Daniel proudly showed him his catch. Uncle Sammy nodded approvingly, a smile playing at his lips. "Now you're learning, Daniel," he said. Daniel felt a warmth he couldn't quite explain, a sense of accomplishment that was different from anything he'd felt before. For the first time, he began to wonder if maybe there was something valuable in this simple life after all. Uncle Sammy decided it was time for Daniel to experience working in the fields. Daniel tried to hide his reluctance, but the idea of bending over plants in the sun seemed exhausting. He was given a hoe and instructed on how to till the soil, a task that felt almost impossibly strenuous at first. His arms and back ached, and he grew frustrated at how difficult it was to keep up with the seasoned farmers around him. As the day wore on, though, Daniel found a rhythm in the work. He began to respect the strength and skill of the villagers, who moved through the fields with ease. Uncle Sammy worked beside him, patient and encouraging, occasionally sharing stories about the land and the traditions of their people. By the end of the day, Daniel was tired beyond anything he'd ever known, but he also felt a sense of camaraderie with those around him. That night, as they shared a simple meal, Uncle Sammy asked Daniel how he was feeling. Daniel admitted it was the hardest thing he'd ever done. "But it feels good," he added, almost surprised by his own words. Uncle Sammy smiled knowingly, seeing the first signs of change in his nephew's heart. Daniel's hands were calloused, his skin tanned from days of working in the fields and spending time by the river. But something unexpected was happening. He was beginning to feel at home. He laughed with the village kids, ate meals with Uncle Sammy, and was slowly letting go of the luxuries he once thought he couldn't live without. One evening, as they sat around a fire with Samson and the other kids, Daniel shared stories about life in Lagos. The children listened, wide-eyed, as he described skyscrapers, cars, and technology. Yet, Daniel noticed that while they were curious, they weren't impressed. For them, happiness wasn't about what you had but the connections you shared with people around you. This realization left Daniel silent, pondering how he had measured his own life by the wrong values. Here, he didn't need to prove himself with wealth or status. He could just be Daniel. As Daniel grew closer to the villagers, he began to realize just how different his life in Lagos had been. One day, he visited the home of a young girl named Amma, who lived in a small hut with her mother and 3 siblings. They had few belongings and little food. Yet Amma and her family were some of the happiest people he'd ever met. Amma's mother welcomed Daniel with open arms, offering him tea and sharing stories about village life. That evening, Daniel reflected on his time with Amma's family. He felt ashamed remembering all the times he had complained about trivial things back in the city. He had been so absorbed in his own desires that he had overlooked how much he truly had. The villagers' resilience and gratitude for what little they had humbled him, making him realize that privilege isn't just about having wealth, it's about what you do with it. One afternoon, Daniel was fishing with Samson by the river when they caught an unusually large fish. It was enough to feed both families, and Daniel was thrilled at the idea of enjoying such a big meal. But Samson surprised him by suggesting they take the fish to Amma's family, who had been struggling with food. Daniel hesitated at first, but seeing Samson's willingness to share what he had, Daniel agreed. They carried the fish to Amma's home, where her family was overjoyed by the gift. Amma's mother hugged both boys, her eyes shining with gratitude. Daniel felt a warmth in his heart, realizing the satisfaction that came from helping others. For the first time, he understood that generosity wasn't about how much you could give but the joy it brought to those around you. Samson's simple act of kindness planted a seed in Daniel's heart, teaching him that wealth meant little if it wasn't shared. One day, Uncle Sammy took Daniel to a sacred part of the village, a grove where their ancestors were buried. Uncle Sammy explained the history of their family, sharing tales of their ancestors' bravery, wisdom, and resilience. Daniel listened intently, his heart swelling with pride as he learned about his heritage. Uncle Sammy's words lingered with Daniel long after they left the grove. For the first time, he felt connected to something bigger than himself, something that had nothing to do with wealth or luxury. It was a legacy of strength, honor, and humility that he wanted to carry on. This newfound pride in his heritage sparked a determination within him to honor his ancestors not by flaunting riches, but by embodying the values they stood for. Uncle Sammy soon entrusted Daniel with a larger role in the village. He asked Daniel to help organize the annual Harvest Festival, a cherished event where the villagers gathered to celebrate their hard work and give thanks. Daniel was overwhelmed by the responsibility but also excited. He threw himself into the preparations, coordinating with the villagers to ensure everything was perfect. Through this experience, Daniel realized how much effort went into creating something meaningful. He learned to listen to others' ideas, to compromise, and to work as a team. As he helped set up the decorations and arrange the seating, he felt a sense of accomplishment that no material possession had ever given him. The festival was a success, and as the villagers celebrated, Daniel felt proud. Not because of his wealth or status, but because of the role he played in bringing people together. At the end of the harvest festival, the village elders invited Daniel to dance. Initially embarrassed, he hesitated, but Uncle Sammy encouraged him. As he joined in, he felt his reservations melt away. The villagers laughed and cheered as he stumbled through the steps, but they encouraged him, clapping in rhythm and showing him the way. Daniel found himself laughing with them, feeling a pure, unfiltered joy he hadn't experienced in years. The dance wasn't about skill or perfection. It was about embracing the moment and connecting with others. In that joyous gathering, Daniel discovered a happiness that transcended material wealth, a feeling he could carry with him long after he left the village. As Daniel's time in the village drew to an end, the villagers came together to host a farewell ceremony for him. They presented him with a handmade bracelet, crafted from local materials, as a symbol of his time with them. Daniel felt a wave of emotion as he accepted the gift, realizing it was far more meaningful than any of the expensive items he owned. The bracelet represented the love, lessons, and memories he had gained over the summer. Daniel vowed to wear it as a reminder of his roots, his family's values, and the village that had taught him the true meaning of wealth. In that moment, he understood that he had received a gift that no amount of money could buy: a sense of belonging and a new perspective on life. Returning to Lagos, Daniel found himself struggling to adjust to city life. His friends mocked his stories of village life, dismissing them as primitive. But Daniel no longer felt the need to impress them. He saw the city through different eyes, noticing the materialism and emptiness that had once consumed him. His heart felt heavy with the realization that he had once been just as shallow. Determined to honor the lessons he'd learned, Daniel began looking for ways to make a positive impact. He started volunteering at a local community center, helping children with their studies and teaching them about the values he had discovered in the village. Slowly, Daniel found his purpose, driven not by wealth but by the desire to make a difference. As Daniel embraced his new path, his relationship with his family deepened. His father, initially surprised by Daniel's transformation, grew proud of his son's growth. Daniel shared his experiences with his parents, encouraging them to visit the village and reconnect with their roots as well. They traveled together, and Daniel's father, too, was moved by the simplicity and generosity of the villagers. Through these visits, Daniel and his family built stronger ties with the village, establishing a scholarship fund for local children and supporting community projects. The villagers welcomed their involvement warmly, grateful for the opportunities Daniel's family provided. Daniel felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing he was giving back to the community that had shaped him. Years passed, and Daniel carried the lessons from the village into every part of his life. He became a compassionate leader, valuing people for who they were rather than their status or wealth. The values he had learned in the village became the foundation of his life, guiding him as he grew into a man who inspired others through his humility and kindness. Reflecting on his journey, Daniel knew that the summer he'd spent in the village had transformed him in ways he couldn't have imagined. It was there, in the heart of his family's roots, that he had discovered a wealth beyond material things, a legacy of love, unity, and purpose that he was determined to carry forward.